Hello once again to another installment of Some Idiot Reads, where I'm Cy. I'm some idiot, and I'm going to read. I hope you enjoy it. We're returning once again to the phenomenal work of the ever-distinguished, the colossal Coyote Wallace. Maybe I'll go with that one. I still gotta get an actual adjective down. Really gotta work on that one. I do not have the gift of that gab. Anyway. He has put out yet another one of his dispatches. This should be one that would be very interesting. But as normally is the case, God, I am stumbling. It's been a long week. But as is normally the case, please go forward, give him a follow. Let me mute my phone. Give him a follow on Medium. Make sure you give him a tip, and be sure to actually go to the article itself and give it a clap. That way, it gets some nice engagement. We want to see these numbers continue to go up. 168 is good. I know, I think the last time I remember, really seriously looking at it and seeing it, it was 150. It is going up. Keep pushing those numbers. People need the Coyote. They need the gonzo journalism. I don't have any scientific evidence for that, but I have a strong suspicion they do need this. Might be personal bias. Probably not. It doesn't matter. Let's get into the reading. Oop. Wait. Oh. Helps if I'm at the right friggin' window. Helps if I hit the right keystroke. Oh my god. There we go. I am a mess right now. Oh boy. Okay. Let us dive in to the latest one. The company you keep. McMahon, Trump, and the stink of corruption. And here we go. Oh, it's actually even all fully on the page here. Nice. Okay. One of my late grandmother's favorite sayings in this whole world was, "You can tell a man from the company he keeps." Or, occasionally, if she was in a mood, she might say, "If you lay with dogs, you're bound to get fleas." She'd break those old sayings out every time she caught me dragging home late in my wilder years, and there was nary a disreputable friend in my menagerie of outcasts and outlaws that she didn't threaten to flog like a wet hen. I imagine I'm not the only one in these hills with such a recollection of old-timey mountain wisdom. A younger me, rebellious and full of idealism, might have balked at such a seemingly draconian assessment of character. Yet, as the years have gone by, and I've come to know the often bitter natures of men, I've become increasingly convinced of the accuracy of her position. Seemingly every day, we're bombarded with fresh scandals, depravities, and such naked corruption that most of us can't even remember what faith in the system looks like. We watch and we wait for the straw that'll break the proverbial camel's back when it comes to corruption in America. I'd wager most of us don't even believe that a bottom exists anymore. There are days I sure as hell don't. I, as the reader, Cy, feel this in my bones. It's a travesty. Especially existing in that cusp place between when there was actually the possibility of believing there was actually faith to have in the system in and of itself, and then where we're at now, burdened with existing in interesting times. And, yeah, no, I feel that in my bones there, dude. Recently, the President of the United States has been implicated in his involvement with the deceased and prolific pedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Trump was reportedly informed by his Attorney General, and traitor to all women and victims of sexual assault, Pam Bondi, that his name appears in the Epstein list several times. This news sent a shockwave through the country. Though it wasn't a surprise, it gave many of us our first glimpse of what might be the bottom of what the American people can stand. Of course, the president has denied any involvement with Epstein, despite numerous pictures, letters, and eyewitness testimony. The administration has even summoned Epstein's cohort to his crimes, Ghislaine Maxwell, with rumors swirling the president will soon pardon her in return for a favorable testimony. I believe the article, as a note, I believe this article was written on the 28th, so about a week and a half ago, from the time of reading. And, yeah, it seems even more by the day that that's the direction it's going to wind up going. We'll see. However, Trump's involvement with Epstein doesn't merely tell us that he's lacking in morality, decency, or basic human goodness. It tells us something about the sort of men Trump surrounds himself with. Powerful men. Men of money. Men who use, victimize, and discard women in vulnerable circumstances like the predators they are. Which leads us to another billionaire accused of sexual assault, human trafficking, and more wrongdoing than you can shake a stick at. I'm talking about Trump's involvement with Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr., former owner of the WWE and Titan Sports, and husband of Linda McMahon, herself the former head of the Small Business Administration under Trump, and current head of the Department of Education. I'm talking about the possibility that Vince McMahon trafficked women to Donald Trump in exchange for his wife securing a favorable position within the administration. I'm talking about corruption. I'm talking about victimization. I'm talking about a system of casual abuse that could stretch back even further than Trump's ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Also, a quick commentary. I, as the reader, again, want to go ahead and call out here, just before I lose this thought in, just reading all of this. Predators. We call these individuals predators because they prey on the weak and vulnerable. And I mean, I suppose that is, I'm not going to take the time to go look and pull it up right now. I suppose that is, generally an MO for predators, but it's also an MO for scavengers, bottom feeders. I don't know. If they only go for those that are vulnerable and weak, are they really that much of a predator? Anyway. Picture shows Donald Trump with most of these individuals I do not know, but I do recognize Ted DiBiase. Or at least that was his wrestling stage name. I don't know if that was actually his name. But here's a picture of Trump backstage in the 80s. Fill your hands. I'm Coyote Wallace. This is the Dispatches from Appalachia. And today we're getting down in the mud and muck as we talk about the company you keep, McMahon, Trump, and the stink of corruption. The bell rings. Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr. is unquestionably the most iconic figure in American pro wrestling. And his company, Titan Sports, WWE/WWF, managed to create a monopoly on the pro wrestling industry. The means and methods Vince and Linda McMahon used to achieve this after purchasing the company from Vince's father, Vince McMahon Sr., in 1982, are the stuff of industry legend. From intimidating venue owners and purchasing television blocks to contract tampering and stealing talent, there was seemingly nothing McMahon would not do to cement his monopoly. What follows is a picture of these two gigantic turds. With his colorful, larger-than-life characters, McMahon soon became an indelible part of American culture. Figures like Rowdy Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Alundra Blaze, the Iron Sheik, Sergeant Slaughter, and more became part and parcel of the American zeitgeist. Vince McMahon was one of the first promoters to marry pro wrestling with rock and roll and MTV. And by the mid-'80s, stars like Alice Cooper, Cyndi Lauper, and others were just as likely to appear on a WWF event as they were on music television. Follows a picture. I want to say that actually is Cyndi Lauper. I don't know if I've actually seen a picture of her, or at least not in a long time. As well as classic actor Mr. T, and human shit stain Hulk Hogan. I don't care that he recently died. Fuck him. He was a racist piece of shit. Pro wrestling is often described as blue-collar theater for the working man, and Vince was an expert at parlaying simple storylines and visceral emotional reactions into a presentation that moved tons of merchandise geared towards children. Good versus evil, home versus foreign, cheaters versus honorable men. These tropes proved they could be recycled an infinite number of times without ever losing their luster. Working class Americans, and even celebrities, fell in love with this fantasy world where good could pummel the hell out of evil. A world where the hero, bloody-faced and beaten ragged, never gave up until he had vanquished his foe to the roaring adulation of the crowd. Little did anyone expect that behind the scenes, Vince and Linda McMahon's growing promotional powerhouse, a darkness was festering. A river of corruption, scandal, abuse, and exploitation running right through the heart of McMahon's fantasy world. Few, if any, could have imagined what was going on once the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds filtered out of the arenas. In the early days, the only criticism McMahon received was that he was too ruthless as a businessman. He made it his life's work not only to outsell the competition, but to ensure that there was never any competition. At the start of the 1980s, there were dozens of localized promotions, and at least 3 major national ones, that rivaled McMahon's growing empire. He would not tolerate this. By the close of the decade, his WWF had purchased almost all known talent, secured the prime television slots, and pressured venue owners to keep out rival organizations. If this ruthlessness seems surprising, it's worth noting that all pro wrestling owes its origins to the days of traveling carnivals in America. There's a code among wrestlers called kayfabe, akin to how magicians protect their secrets. If you were a pro wrestler in the 1980s, speaking out against anything that threatened the industry's illusion could earn you a blacklisting. Another picture of 2 better dressed giant turds. Fuck the McMahons. Within the industry itself, fans aren't called fans. They're called marks. A mark is anyone who believes in the illusion, and who you can make money from. As it would turn out, Vince McMahon was threatening the entire world, was treating the entire world like they were marks. Ring boys, steroids, and cover-ups. Picture, Rita Chatterton. I'm actually not familiar with her, so I'm horrified and intrigued to see where this goes. The first signs of McMahon's corruption made themselves known in 1986, when Rita Chatterton, one of pro wrestling's first female referees, a founding member of the International Wrestling Hall of Fame and the Women's Wrestling Hall of Fame, accused Vince McMahon of rape. Chatterton, then billed as Rita Marie, had already overcome pushback from Vince's inner circle regarding her position. Men like Pat Patterson and Chief Jay Strongbow attempted to bar her from working as a referee, claiming that women working as officials detracted from the believability of a presentation that has, in the past, included living dead men, road warriors, demons from hell, and even RoboCop. Chatterton was only able to work as a referee because she threatened to sue the WWF for discrimination. When Vince reluctantly agreed, Chatterton claims she overheard Strongbow and Patterson encouraging wrestling talent to injure her and, quote, show her that a referee's job is no position for a woman, end quote. Unfortunately for them, Rita became a hit for fans. Her picture appeared on magazine covers, and she became an unlikely star of the rock and wrestling era of the WWF. She was attractive, young, and the fact that she was a woman officiating matches between giant men captured the imagination of fans. What follows is an image, I believe, from a 80s era talk show. Rita alleges forced sex with World Wrestling Federation president. In 1986, according to Chatterton, Vince McMahon invited her to ride along with him in his limo to discuss the future of her contract. Chatterton alleges that Vince first propositioned her with a promise to move her from referee to in-ring talent, which would mean tons more money, in exchange for oral sex. When she refused, McMahon raped her. She was immediately let go by the WWF and blacklisted in the industry, appearing only sporadically for small independent promotions outside of the WWF's orbit. Chatterton refused to work any event that was remotely near Vince McMahon. Later, out of spite and pettiness, the WWF erased Chatterton from their official history and credited Jessica Carr as their first female referee. That's what Vince McMahon does to people who try to stop him from hurting others in the industry. He erases them, their legacy, and their accomplishments. This would soon become a trend. Yet, Vince McMahon was not alone in his scandals and wicked behavior, nor was this the only terrible secret buried beneath the ring. To cut costs, in the 1980s, the WWF used young local men from the towns they visited as gophers, stagehands, and for the assembly and disassembly of the rings. These young men, typically between the ages of 14 and 17, were referred to as ring boys. They weren't paid, or as many were happy to work just for the opportunity to see the show and meet the talent. Mel Phillips, the on-screen ring announcer, was given authority by the McMahon family to oversee these groups of boys. It follows as a picture of Mel Phillips. Around 1992, Tom Cole, pictured below, one of those ring boys, went public with allegations of horrendous abuse during his time working for the WWF. Cole had begun with the company in 1983 at the age of just 13. Eager to enter what he believed was the world of heroes, he toured with the WWF throughout the Northeast. A runaway from a broken home, Cole said that Phillips even encouraged him to recruit other runaways in the towns they visited. Everywhere they went to, filled with cheering crowds and bright-eyed youngsters, brought more potential victims. According to legal documents, Cole alleged that Phillips engaged in fetishistic play with his feet, including rubbing them against Phillips's genitals. Cole claimed other ring boys had similar experiences, and that they were kept as sort of a private harem for Phillips and his friends. One of those friends was Terry Joyle, better known to fans as Terry Garvin, who was Cole's direct supervisor on the ring crew. According to Cole, Joyle first propositioned him during a trip to Massachusetts in 1988, offering drugs and alcohol in exchange for oral sex. When Cole refused, he was removed from his duties as punishment. Pictured, Terry Joyle. The second incident occurred in 1990, when Joyle once again attempted to force Cole into a sexual relationship. When Cole again refused, Mel Phillips terminated his employment. Cole would also go on to accuse Pat Patterson, famous West Coast pro wrestler and supervisor over both Phillips and Joyle, of sexual misconduct with a minor. Patterson, inventor of the popular Royal Rumble event, was a key member of Vince and Linda McMahon's inner circle. Pictured, Pat Patterson. In a 2000 interview with Business Insider, longtime WWF attorney Jerry McDevitt admitted that the second incident had occurred, but denied that there was a culture of abuse within the WWF. He claimed that following the scandal, the company ensured all ring crew members were over the age of 18. Notably, he did not deny that abuse continued, only that it no longer happened to children. Joyle, Phillips, and Patterson were all released following the allegations. McMahon told sports writer Phil Mushnick that they were conducting a quote-unquote detailed investigation. He also admitted that Phillips had previously been warned for a, quote, peculiar and possibly inappropriate relationship with young boys, end quote. Patterson and Joyle were eventually rehired, seemingly because it was only their first public accusation of sexual misconduct with minors. Let's take a moment now and consider Linda McMahon's role in all of this. Maybe she had some obscure administrative job that removed her from day-to-day operations. Something in finance, perhaps. Nope. Linda McMahon was president and CEO. The woman, who would later head the Department of Education, oversaw a company that not only exploited children and runaways to cut costs, but knowingly put them in harm's way. She rehired 2 men previously accused of misconduct and allowed them to return to the same roles where those allegations had first emerged. Picture Phillips in a hotel room provided by the WWF with teenage boys. And of course, the quote, ring boy scandal, unquote, wasn't the only cloud hanging over the WWF. By 1994, the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York found enough evidence to bring Vince McMahon to trial. He was accused of distributing illegal steroids to his performers and creating a workplace where their use was strongly encouraged. He had no regard for the harm that these drugs would do to those putting them in their bodies. Performers who refused to take steroids were often punished by way of televised losses or reduced screen time. Those who complied were promoted to bigger roles, which meant more merchandise, higher salaries, and better contracts. Those who didn't have the look were relegated to the undercard as enhancement talent. McMahon ultimately beat the charges, appearing in court each day, wearing a neck brace, and spending a small fortune on his legal team. He was so convinced he'd be convicted that he'd already chosen Jerry Jarrett to run the company during his anticipated prison term. Pictured Vince and Linda McMahon, with I don't believe it was Vince saying it, but the caption is beautiful. I can't believe that worked. Most innocent rich white men don't assume they're going to prison. Throughout the late 90s and into the 2000s, McMahon would continue to push the limits of what was acceptable on television. What came to be known as the Attitude Era was filled with skits, many written by McMahon himself, that, in hindsight, offer a deeply unsettling look into his mind. In one instance, while playing the role of the evil boss, Vince McMahon forced female performer Trish Stratus to strip and bark like a dog on her hands and knees in order to keep her job. Repeatedly, McMahon would write himself into storylines where he could humiliate, degrade, or cast himself in a sexually dominant role. These women could, of course, turn down the roles, but if they did, they lost their spot. And if Vince fired them, they faced the reality of WWE's near monopoly on the industry. Falls as a picture of the skit mentioned, which, growing up on a lot of the WWE, and in particular the Attitude Era, I remember that one playing. I remember the vibe of all those things. And yeah, it's incredibly unsettling. I mean, I know for me there is nostalgia present, and some of the skits and storylines I really did just enjoy vibe and interest to it. Like a lot of the stuff that they did with The Undertaker during that era was, from a narrative perspective and like theatrics, I enjoyed. But then you had crap like this that, I mean, as a kid, I didn't really process it. I didn't analyze it in any great depth. Of like, I mean, again, the evil boss situation that Vince McMahon consistently portrayed. I just took it in as, oh, it's another part of the story. Yes, the CEO is an evil, horrifying piece of shit. Yeah, that goes along with it. But I didn't think of the fact that, like, no, the dude coming, well, and I didn't know, the dude coming up with these stories is that evil piece of shit. And it would be more likely you would cast yourself in kind of like a positive role. But like, no, instead you just leaned into the monster, which kind of does say you just wanted carte blanche to be that monster in front of everyone and like have people just eat it up, which is a whole different kind of monster. All right. In tabletop role-playing circles, there's a term we use, bleed, when people begin to identify too strongly with their characters and the lines between reality and fantasy blur. As a long-term tabletop gamer myself, yes, when you are playing heavily in character, that sort of bleed can happen. It's definitely something to be mindful of. I myself have had that happen a bit, and usually I allow myself like half hour after any kind of a game to like, okay, let's just decompress, disentangle, don't stay in character. Same thing happens with method actors in particular. It's a thing that you get too much into that character and you've got to take the time to step away. Most of the time, these people don't have the means to fully manifest their fantasies. And even then, it usually ends in heartbreak. Vince McMahon, however, is one of the richest men in America, with absolute power and authority over those who worked for him. I believe he began to show his true face. McMahon's final scandal with the WWE came in 2019, when it was revealed that he had embezzled $10.5 million of company funds to pay two women to keep them from bringing claims against him or the WWE. He failed to report the expense and was caught by the SEC in the attempted cover-up. The SEC would go on to settle with McMahon, issuing a $400,000 fine and agreeing not to release the details of their internal investigation. It follows a picture, Walt Disney back from the dead, and he's very creepy. You have any, John Waters would like you to stop making his mustache look bad. Dude. You look like that sort of just nightmarish Hans Christian Andersen carny head. Honestly. Because of the accusations and the theft of funds from a publicly traded company and its shareholders, McMahon was finally forced to step down from the business his family had built. He would leave behind a legacy in which his triumphs as one of America's most successful promoters were permanently shadowed by his misdeeds and predatory behavior. McMahon, the man who helped create Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, The Bad Guy, Razor Ramon, Big Daddy Cool Diesel, and many more characters that defined the childhoods and formative years of millions, was finally down for the count. At least with his company. but McMahon would soon find himself back in hot water. Pictured, Janelle Grant. In January 2024, Janelle Grant, a woman who had been employed by Vince McMahon, filed allegations of the most horrendous kind. According to Grant, she had been first coerced and then systematically assaulted by McMahon over a period of months. She claimed, eventually, she claimed he began trafficking her to his friends and business associates. This included, in at least one instance, former UFC heavyweight champion and WWE star Brock Lesnar. Pictured. According to Grant, she was kept as McMahon's plaything, passed around and used however he and his associates desired. This reportedly included multiple gang assaults, being choked unconscious, defecated upon, and coerced into making explicit digital content for business dealings. Specifically, she was ordered to create videos to send to Brock Lesnar, who is married, in an effort to pressure him into signing a long-term deal with the WWE rather than a potential rival. Others, like John Laurinaitis, a former professional wrestler and most recently the WWE's head of talent relations, were also named. Laurinaitis at first denied the claims, then later stated he only participated because he feared for his job if he defied McMahon. Laurinaitis, pictured below. The rest of the details, in what's now being called the Grant Report, can be found here if you have the stomach for it. The Carney and the Con Man. It may come as no surprise to you, but the old Orange King and Vince McMahon are old friends. The two have a long and sordid and somewhat expectedly trashy relationship, including Vince using Donald as a character in his storylines more than once. In fact, Trump was written as the hero fighting against the corrupt Vince McMahon in the years before his first presidential run, which, if you can believe it, true. Vince McMahon actually paid $5 million to Donald Trump's foundation between 2007 and 2009. But, unlike traditional payments to talent, Vince never recorded the payments. That's right. He never publicly divulged the payments. The only reason we know they were made is that they were leaked in a Wall Street Journal report. Any records on Trump's side were lost when he dissolved his foundation in 2018. Going a step further to pander to Trump's ego, Vince McMahon had Donald Trump personally inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. You may not have known that, but our current president is also the only one we've ever had who is in the same Hall of Fame as Pete Rose, Drew Carey, and Mr. T. This wasn't their first dealing, not by a long shot. The first time Trump and McMahon crossed paths was in 1988, during the height of the abuses mentioned in the Ring Boy scandal. It was at that time that Trump provided Vince with a venue for the WWE's only back-to-back WrestleManias. Trump Plaza hosted WrestleMania 4 in 1988 and WrestleMania 5 in 1989, and Trump attended both. According to Trump himself, in a 2011 interview with documentary filmmakers, he found Vince to be an unusually great guy. But the two weren't just patting each other on the back. When one considers the amount of revenue brought in by these events, the picture becomes all the more clear. WrestleMania 5 alone brought in more than $1.4 million in ticket sales, not counting pay-per-view, closed circuit, or merchandise sales. This establishes a long history of the two men working together. It places Trump in Vince McMahon's orbit during some of the worst scandals imaginable. Let's go a step further. Trump appeared as a character during the 2007 Battle of the Billionaires storyline, in which Vince McMahon wrote him to be the victor. We also know Vince had Trump inducted into the Hall of Fame. But the pandering doesn't end there. Vince wrote numerous storylines designed to appeal to Donald's ego. These included one where a Trump impersonator beat up a Rosie O'Donnell impersonator, another where Trump issued refunds for tickets, and, in one famous instance, even dropped $100 bills from the rafters of Monday Night Raw, nearly causing a riot in the process. Picture from the Battle of the Billionaires storyline. I remember that as a child. Captioned, "This is the closest Trump has ever been to a black man." So, we have a clear pattern of Vince McMahon wanting to impress, or, at the very least, ingratiate himself to Donald Trump. We have, thanks to Grant's testimony and provided text messages, examples of Vince McMahon using trafficked victims of sexual assault to placate or sway talent, including his attempt to gift Janelle Grant to Brock Lesnar. We know Vince McMahon paid $5 million to silence 2 women who were preparing to make allegations against him. We know Vince McMahon, for some reason, made sure to pay Donald Trump off the books. We know Donald Trump and Vince McMahon are old friends. We know Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein are old friends. We have photographic evidence of Trump exiting a jet along with his son and several female WWE talents. Whether those women were told to escort Trump or whether they went voluntarily, we cannot know. We know Linda McMahon was appointed to head the Department of Education despite having no background in education. Despite her family's involvement in scandals involving the victimization of children. One must ask the question, what currency was her position bought with? Did they buy their way in with money? Or did they buy their way in with sex? Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to ask you this. If Vince would use Janelle Grant to sway Brock Lesnar, then who's to say what he would use to sway Donald Trump? And if he did do it, if there are records, if any of the talent ever came forward, or if the investigations into Vince McMahon ever go deep enough, then this could end up just behind the Epstein list in terms of damning indictments against a corrupt administration. You can see the quality of one of Trump's oldest friends for yourself. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not surprised at all. Solidarity forever. Oh boy. Oh boy. Very much in agreement with the comments on here. These are the types of investigations mainstream media should be doing. Honestly, entirely agreed. And the other comment here, you are the GOAT for this. Never knew how deep it went, and as a person out of the US, WWE was something I too grew up on. And, yeah, same. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of formative memories for me growing up as a kid. I loved the Attitude Era of stuff when I was growing up, which honestly is really fucked up thinking back on it. I don't think that says anything particularly negative about me as a kid. I mean, plenty of people really enjoyed the Attitude Era stuff. I think it says something to the depths of manipulation and presentation and grasp of theatrics and what would grab crowds. But it does warrant looking at more critically. There was definitely some fucked up shit in there. Never mind all the additional stuff that was brought up there at the end. Those are some very compelling questions to be raised. Because it always struck me as weird at the start of this administration when he set Linda McMahon as the Secretary of Education. Really? The fuck? That made no sense. It still doesn't make any sense. So. As always, an excellent article, Coyote. Absolutely love it. Gonna go ahead and remind you all, if you did enjoy this, please go to the page, go give it a reread yourself, take it all back in, and make sure at the bottom you give it a clap. Bam. And make sure you give it a comment if you can. Doesn't have to be a long one. Let's see. We'll just go with excellent work. Just leave it as that. I think that works well. And boom. Also, please ensure that you go forward and right here, that little hand icon there, go ahead. If you can afford to do so without harming yourself, go give a tip. Seriously, every little bit helps. Even if it's just a friggin' $1, man. Toss a tip to the dude's Ko-Fi. I'll have a link in the description as well. Go make sure and check that out. In addition, I'm going to try and actually work this in somewhere earlier on, or I don't know. But I kind of want to actually give a nice shout out to Nightmare Press as well. They are the publisher for Coyote's work. His first book, American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful, which was #1 in low fantasy on Amazon and is still available. Go buy a copy. They're also going to be publishing his next couple of books that are going to be coming out. I think it's 2 in the pipe. And he might have another one that he's just like getting close to finishing. I don't know. Dude's prolific as shit. I love it. Buy his stuff. But more importantly, go check out Nightmare Press in general. They have got an amazing stable of authors that I really want to see more positive attention drawn to these kind of small-time publishers. I grew up with Bantam, Del Rey. Those are the 2 big ones that actually stand out like heavily in my mind. I grew up with those, but like you go to a place like Barnes and Noble or something, you're not going to find shit anymore. Or maybe there is, but like, I don't know. I don't feel it. I'm not feeling it coming from those places. You're not going to find, I don't find anything that's anything more than just, I don't know, like it's the equivalent of an exceptionally well-made Big Mac. If that makes sense. Versus like getting a really nicely cooked steak in a backyard. And that's what Nightmare Press is. They're a well-cooked steak at a backyard barbecue. And everyone's invited. So, make a point. Go check out their site. I will have a link to them as well in the description here. And show a small-time publisher some love. Alright. You guys, all of you, take care. And catch you on the flip side. Deuces.